And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
Welcome to Animal Farm, City Garage's weekly discussion of theater, politics, and pets. If you have a video of your pet that you'd like to share with us, please send it to animalfarm@citygarage.org. That's animalfarm, one word, at citygarage, also one word, .org. We're joined today by playwright and director Neil LaBute. LaBute has been described by the Village Voice as America's most misanthropic playwright. His plays include Filthy Talk for Troubled Times, In the Company of Men, Bash, Latter-day Plays, The Shape of Things, Fat Pig, Rex, Reasons to be Pretty, The Break of Noon, Reasons to be Happy, Money Shot, and How to Fight Loneliness. The national touring production of The Break of Noon premiered in Los Angeles at the Geffen Playhouse and was presented a few years later by City Garage. His films, in which he served as both writer and director, include In the Company of Men, Your Friends and Neighbors, Bash, Possession, The Shape of Things, and The Wicker Man. Neil LaBute, welcome to Animal Farm.
Thanks very much.
Neil, you're joining us from New York, where you say just this evening you finished a theater project. I was wondering if you could fill us in on what that's about and what happened.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Did a new piece at a theater called the Denizen in New Paltz, upstate New York. It was something I wrote for them to do out of doors, and we tried to get that sanctioned by Equity, and that didn't happen. They were really skittish. This is really two actors sitting, not talking to each other, speaking to an audience that's sitting out of doors and kind of socially distanced and all of that. They wouldn't sanction it for the actors. So we found ourselves unable to perform it. So we decided to go back into the theater, bring in 8 people per show, and so they're all sitting, fully 6 feet apart, and but recorded the actors so that you go in and listen to an auditory experience with lights and sound and all of that. But at least we got some people back into a theater. So it's a step forward, a small step, I would say. But having seen a lot of Zoom theater and all that, that's a pretty small step as well. So yes. This at least brought some bodies back into an actual theater.
So the theater, the audience was live, the actors were not. So you were halfway there.
Los Angeles, anything of note going on and people in a theater anywhere?
There's a bit of, there's a couple of drive-in theaters. Playwrights Arena just closed a drive-in theater production in which the audience shows up in their cars in a parking lot. And if they wish, they can keep their windows closed to protect them from the audience. The play is called March, or was called March. I think it's closed now. And the audience is invited to tune into an FM radio station in their cars, and the actors beam with it. So, and it was kind of an Orwellian futuristic concept. So it all played nicely. There's a bit of that, and there's a little bit of outdoor theater, but not much. And now it's getting really bad. Obviously the cases are spiking nationally, and Los Angeles County is the numbers are suddenly growing exponentially. This is a cause of serious concern.
Sure.
I have a quick question from a fan who is an editor of this show. 10 years ago, the Chicago Shakespeare did a production of Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah.
And you wrote the framing scenes for that production, which she saw and said those scenes were fantastic and just melded beautifully. And I'm just wondering if you could remember that.
Thank her for seeing. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. That was, and I took some blows, as I often do. Critically, things often are quite polarized. And that was no exception. You kind of know you're opening yourself up like there's 2 playwrights here. Who's going to get the best notices?
Yeah.
Even with Taming of the Shrew,
yeah.
I got the worst notices. So it's a tough gig. But a friend of mine who was running used to run the Bush Theater and then ran the Donmar Theater, Josie Rourke, she came and directed that production. And she didn't want to use the sort of framing device that had always existed there, the Christopher slide. And so I said, yeah, I'll write something that works as both frames it, and then there's some interstitial as well. So it was a company putting on the show, and a director and lead actress who were sort of in love and in conflict, and kind of mirroring some of the power dynamics that were going on in the play. Yes. And I had a great time. It was a blast to do that sort of thing. It was kind of like, let's put on a show. And everybody was pretty game, and we had a good time. So I'm happy that, you know, someone got a chance to see it.
No, evidently. So, you know, you can't always believe the critics. In fact, you should probably.
I try not to believe, you know, the hard thing is, if you believe the good ones, you kind of have to believe the bad ones. And I don't mean the critics, the reviews. You know, it's weird to play that game of like, only the ones that like me get it. You know, like, sometimes it's like people get it and they don't like it. So you kind of just have to have tunnel vision and push forward if you're going to be in this business.
You took playwriting workshop at the Royal Court Theatre in the early days. And I'm just curious if you see a difference in the way the English approach the craft of playwriting and the development of plays versus what we're doing in this country, or if can even such a generalization be made?
It is a generalization, and I think that it's actually I didn't take courses there. I was actually at the Royal Court on a fellowship, and so I was working in the lit department, and I was around Matt Stafford Clark, and he was doing a revival of Top Girls at that time. So I was kind of shadowing him at that moment. So I didn't actually see. I saw them looking at plays that they had developed, and I think the process was similar to the kinds of things I've seen here in the times that I've been in development. They're you know, often I think they push toward the political maybe a bit more than we do. Just as a generalization. But in terms of, you know, just looking for a good script and kind of knowing it when they see it, it felt like the same sort of process. So I couldn't pinpoint for you like this is what the English do and this is what the Americans do. They, you know, everybody's looking for a good story well told, I guess.
In terms of what you're working on now and what you worked on 10 years ago, as you develop both plays and movies, the unbelievable changes in our political culture have just saturated the culture, our culture and the international culture. And I'm just wondering, has your approach to writing a new work been affected by that, or do you go by the same hallmarks, which you've been described by the Village Voice as America's most misanthropic playwright or something to that effect? First, is that fair? And secondly, has your desire to upend expectations been changed by a world in which every expectation has been upended by the realities of our political environment?
Yeah, it makes it a little harder to upend things these days. Truth definitely stranger than fiction at this moment. But maybe that's always the case, you know, and yet we still are out there looking to tell some kind of a story. I've never been that political a writer, you know, it's probably more personal politics. You know, sexual politics, that kind of thing. So I don't know that my approach, ultimately when I get right down to like, here's an idea and I want to write that, I'll still write that way. Do I check myself more as I get older? I don't know. I guess you pile up a certain number of works and you want to make sure that you're not repeating yourself, that you're still trying to strive to do something new. There's certainly that. You've always have an eye on the landscape and see what other people are doing. But I've never been too much of a chaser that way. I'm still trying to find my own path up the hill. So I guess there's a bit of a bit more of watching what I'm doing and trying to both better myself, best myself, that sort of thing, not repeat myself. But it's hard if you listen to too many voices. I think the more you hear, the crowd, the more you hear people whispering, is that okay to say? Can you not say that? What can't you not say and say these days? Is this appropriate? Is this what's the catchphrase today? Problematic. It's already hard enough to lift up a pen or put your hands on the keys and say, let's try and be funny, let's try and be dramatic, let's try and tell a good story. But if you shackle yourself with a lot of this is what you can't do, this is what you can do, in the end, it's funny, in the last however many months here we've been dealing with isolation and COVID and all of that. I think that in a way, I feel like I'm back 20 years or 30 years going, I'm just writing for myself. I have no idea when this piece I'm working on will see the stage, or if it ever will see the stage.
Yes.
And that's the way it was when I was younger. But it didn't stop me from writing, and wanting to tell that story and hoping that it reached some small, audience. One of the very first pieces of a play, I did a play called Bash 20 years ago. One of the first pieces that I wrote, I did with an audience over in London. I was visiting as not a student, but I was over there visiting, and I gathered a group of about 10 people in somebody's apartment, somebody's flat, and read it with another person. So, and that was by candlelight. And I remember reading the intro to Wallace Shawn's The Fever, begging us to like get into our living rooms and do this play and that kind of thing. And maybe that's where we're headed right now. Back to that's going to be the first breath of theater that we have again here in the next while, is doing it, for our families, reading plays like people used to do, and putting them on. So we're going to all be like, Joe in Little Women, gathering our sisters and family members to put on a play. But it'll never die. It's an awfully resilient medium and art form. So I have a good feeling that it will chug onward, maybe a slow chug, but it'll keep going well past the time that we're here and into the future.
If there's an idea that you can envisage in a post-COVID world, a play or a film, do you have any seeds for ideas of just general concepts you would like to develop through some kind of theatrical form, either a play or a movie?
Well, I probably like everybody, I had that moment, early on during all this where I was thinking, gosh, how can I keep working? What can I do? Because so much of what I love to do is work. What story can I tell? What couple people can I bring together to tell a story? Whether it feels that it has something to say about what's going on right now, or just like I'm suspicious, like most lives, people have other things going on as well. Other people are falling in love and falling out of love, and I think a lot are falling out of love because they've been spending so much time together.
Yeah.
I had no idea. They have other concerns. They go to the doctor for other things rather than COVID as well. So telling some of those stories felt important, just like where are we today and how are we feeling? And the more, I've always tried to kind of blend theater and film and even working on television, put performance at the forefront. And so the more one can let an audience, watch an actor act and spend less time, I guess, here showing New York City as opposed to here are two people in New York City in this apartment and they're not going to leave. They're just going to talk because that's what a lot of people do. There may be time for more of that now because that's the way. There'll be a lot more movies like Tom Noonan's, What Happened Was, because everybody will be filming in their own apartment with, a couple of friends. So I guess telling some stories, I've always tried to tell, smaller stories and stories that just interested me. And I hope I go back to doing that relatively quickly and don't feel like it's always got to be a story where people are wearing masks. That would be great, that the stories resonate 20 years from now in a way that it doesn't just say, oh, that was that time where everybody was, wearing masks and this horrible thing happened.
Yeah.
I hope that there are other issues that we can talk about in our next plays and films that, we'll go right back to telling all kinds of stories.
Yes.
So that's my hope, is that I'll have something to say about this time, but also it'll be, about all time, just about our general concerns.
Thank you. I have two final questions.
Sure.
And one, they're related, they're cousins. That's why I'm springing two questions at once. If you can look back over since the late 80s when you presented your first play to now, I was just going to ask, what is the most exasperating experience you can remember? And to be followed by what is the most exhilarating experience you can remember from your work in the theater or on this movie set?
I guess, anything that was, of course I could pinpoint specifically something if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, because that's just sort of gossip. But generally, anything that's the largest coffee mug I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, yes. It's the year of the pig mug.
Okay, yeah. It was
yes.
It's
huge. It's huge.
It was for a beer stein, and I was like, congratulations. And yet it was like a coffee mug. So that's crazy. So anything that was not collaborative, and I've had a couple of those, but relatively few. A couple of directors, a couple of experiences where you go, that just the process to me should always be as exciting as the product. It's great to put on a good show and feel that, but never at the expense of the doing of it and the people who are working on it.
If I could clarify, I know you're trying to avoid specifics, but when you say something that was not collaborative, just even in theoretical, what are you referring to?
When a director or a writer, isn't willing to let you into the process, who says, I don't want a word changed, or you wrote this and now just sit back, let me do my magic. I think, at the process at its best is kind of an open communication. Best idea wins constantly, every day. Like, a bunch of, I almost said lawyers, but not quite like that. I don't want to be a lawyer. But, people who can work not just passionately, plenty of passion, but working toward getting an answer that makes sense and putting it on stage and moving on the next day and not feeling, like, oh, I've been shut out or that kind of thing. So, so any experience that I had like that, and probably the best of those, I've had some really good experiences along the way. One of the most recent and really maybe best I've had. Well, one was definitely working on a one person show with Ed Harris. Ed Harris, just a phenomenal actor, but a great human being, and just kind of like no bullshit, just constantly let you know where you were in the process. And I think we did the show 4 times, a couple times in Los Angeles, once in New York, started it in Cork, Ireland, and just always, felt like it was you and he doing this thing together. And so that's like the best kind of, situation you can have. I worked at a state theater in Germany, directing Uncle Vanya. And that was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Because this group of people that, just had lived together as actors and done so many productions together. And it just felt like the old days of like stepping into like some actor manager troupe that was traveling around the country. And we're going to put on Uncle Vanya. And I was working in German. I don't speak German, but that didn't stop me from doing the play. They were very kind. They all like to work on their English as well. So it was good for me. But working with this troupe that just really was the oldest working theater in Germany. It's in Konstanz. And just a great group of people who, you got an extra long period of time. For American, it was like 6 weeks of rehearsal. And it was a blast to work in a situation like that. It was so unlike what we're used to here. There's just not the kinds of like state companies they're funded by their town, and they're there year after year, many of them. And it was such a great way to see theater done, you know, and then to watch them on, you know, other nights performing other shows. And it was just it was a really big gift that I don't think that many Americans get a chance to be a part of. So,
Neil LaBute, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next week, Animal Farm goes to Pristina, Kosovo, where we're joined by two playwrights, Jetan Neziraj and Roland Schimmerpfennig. Neziraj has written over 25 plays that have been staged and performed in Europe as well as the USA. His plays and his writings have been translated and published into more than 15 languages. As a playwright, he's worked and had his plays shown in various theaters, including La Mama in New York, the Volksbühne in Berlin, the Piccolo Teatro di Milano, the National Theatre of Kosovo, City Garage in Santa Monica, and the National Theatres of Montenegro, as well as the Turkish National Theatre. Schimmelpfennig is one of the most important unstaged playwrights in Europe. His plays have been translated to over 30 languages and have been staged in 50 countries around the world. In 2010, Schimmelpfennig was awarded the Mülheim Dramatist Prize for his play Der Goldene Drache, The Golden Dragon, which premiered at the Burgtheater in Vienna in 2009. And after that, he's had over 30 productions around the world. With thanks to Ruth and Cordelia, please enjoy the photo of Mary, the superhero cat, as well as the video Climbing the Human Body with Scoopy the dog and Chip the cat.